on. Rebel never know about you trying it on. It's free, they're not gonna charge you nothing to try it on. You owe yourself a try on. I said, I'm not even trying it on, devil. I'm not even gonna go in there and look at it. That's when the devil shoved me in the door.
Okay, so some of you remember watching The Devil Made Me Do It. It's a great way to get out of a whole lot of stuff. So anybody, you heard that in high school, Vicki? You heard people sharing that?
Oh yeah, that was, yeah. And you could do it with his tone as well. So that was the other thing. I had friends who would do that.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to get the Bible study up here and make it a screen share. Here we go. So the introduction to Satan, I got the idea for this topic because Jesus gets tossed out into the wilderness in the lectionary for today. And after Jesus is baptized by John the Baptist, then verse 13, at once the Spirit sent him out into the wilderness, and he was in the wilderness 40 days being tempted by Satan. So how many times have you heard a sermon preached on Satan?
Not recently.
When we were in Nigeria, there were certain denominations that you would hear more about the devil and Satan and this type of thing, but we Church of the Brethren don't go there, it seems like.
Right. And I don't know that I've ever heard a sermon about Satan. I think I'm going to preach one on Sunday, sort of. So why do you think that we don't talk about Satan?
The devil made me do it.
So how many of you have met personal acquaintance with Satan?
Well, I think that's the reason we don't hear so much about Satan, because we don't want to go there. You know, I mean, and if you think about how old Flip Wilson was talking about it, it's blaming your bad choices on somebody else. Well, it wasn't my fault. I didn't do it. So there's that. You know, is Satan the guy with horns and a tail, or is Satan, you know, someplace to blame? Is Satan the metaphor? So.
Right. Does Satan have room in our hearts, or is Satan outside of our hearts?
Well, if you follow the arts at all, you know, I'm thinking of music. I mean, Black Sabbath. Anybody ever hear of that group? Or Ozzy Osbourne was part of that. I don't know. Maybe all of you were good. You didn't listen to that kind of music. I certainly had friends who listened to that kind of music.
The guy who ate off chicken heads in the concert. What was his name?
Well, that's Alice Cooper.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe, you know, one of the, actually, I know those artists. This one I don't know so much about. Marilyn Manson, who is actually a man, not a woman. So there's all kinds of cultural stuff like that. I remember listening, I mean, I used to listen to AM radio, you know, and which just tells you how long ago that was. And there was a guy named Bob Larson who had a kind of a talk show, and he would talk about Satanism all the time.
Oh.
You can look it up on the internet.
So does Jesus talk about Satan? I have someone want to look up Mark 4, verse 15. Read that. Someone can read that for us?
I can read it, Gail.
Okay, thank you, Kathy.
And these are the ones by the wayside where the word is sown. When they hear, Satan comes immediately and takes away the word that was sown in their hearts.
Okay, so what passage is that? You know the parable that they're talking about here? It's probably in the heading in your Bible.
The parable of the sower explained.
Yes, the sower went out to sow some seed, and some fell on good soil, and some fell on bad soil. So here's Jesus. If we had anybody have a red letter version of the Bible where all of the words of Jesus are in red, I wonder. So Donna does. Is that section in red, Donna? Oh, you're not into the microphone yet.
Talking louder.
Now you are.
In verse 11 down to 13 is in red, and then at 13 it says, and he said to them,
Oh,
and then it goes on down to verse 20.
okay. So here's Jesus talking about Satan. And so I wonder if where did Jesus and Satan meet anyway?
Somewhere in the wilderness.
I think that's it. I think right away Jesus is baptized and boom, off he goes. The different gospels have a different scenario, but this says, and at once the Spirit sent him out into the wilderness, and guess who's there to greet him? Satan and some wild animals. Oh boy, that sounds fun. And some angels. So everything sounds awfully dangerous. And he was baptized in the wilderness by John the Baptist, but here's a different wilderness, evidently, where he's off to with hanging out with these temptations. So Mark doesn't even give us a clue what the temptations were. We don't have any idea if we only had this one gospel. The other gospels give us a whole bunch of ideas about what the temptations were. Well, I mean, Matthew and Luke do. I don't think there's anything in John. So we have these temptations, and Satan is smart. You know, what do we know about Satan? We know from Mark chapter 4 that Kathy just read. What does Satan do?
It invades your heart and takes away the good.
Snatches away. That sounds really nasty. So Satan is like a greedy, nasty kind of presence. Yeah, invades into your heart. So so we know a lot of people know this version of the Satan and the devil from C.S. Lewis, and he's the the author of Chronicles of Narnia and the movie version of Chronicles of Narnia. And so he's got this famous book called The Screwtape Letters. Has anybody heard of that?
I've heard of it, but I've never read it.
Yeah, so it's kind of a novel, it's a fiction, but the characters, Dave, you want to explain this? You're the you own the book. You can talk about it.
Well, it's been a while since I've read it, but you have, written there, Screwtape is a devil. He's writing to a devil in training. And Wormwood, of course, comes. I don't know where the reference is, but basically, it's kind of like, so C.S. Lewis is creating this relationship between the two, and and it's basically things like, gosh, if you can get someone to go to church and gossip about their neighbor, that's good. In other words, it's all these tactics that C.S. Lewis imagines that a devil in training would need to be trained in order to be a good tempter.
Try to get him into sin, to turn his life into sin. I think my favorite Screwtape instruction is, if you can just get the patient, which is the person they're trying to tempt, if you can just get the patient to be so busy, they won't have any time for Jesus. They'd be so busy doing good things for the world that there's just no time in their life to be to have the love of Jesus in them. So they have all these great tactics. It's like, man, that's probably really true. That I'm just too busy to pray today. I'm just too busy to have Bible study today. And it's, why do we have all these time-saving equipment, and then we're still so way too busy to do anything that might be that might be a forever kind of, something that would last forever, and not just cook the next meal or wash your clothes the next time. So what are the ways that you think you might be able to train Wormwood into getting you away from being a disciple of Jesus? What are the things that might be effective in our day, in our time? This was probably written in the 1950s or 1940s.
Look at on TV. Sports can pull us. Our families can pull us away. Lots of things to distract.
Yeah, absolutely. Even all good things. Sports can be wonderful. Families are good things. Name your favorite addiction. Mine is popcorn. Or Netflix. or
Iowa Hawkeye basketball.
Oh yeah, gotta love that. Yeah. So how do we know what Satan looks like?
To me, that's not important.
And the reason why is
Because I can appreciate what evil things are he or she's working on to convince me without seeing this as a person.
right. So maybe the devil is what is dwelling in our hearts, right? Maybe it doesn't have Flip Wilson's version of, he comes up and he tempts you to buy a dress. He takes the steering wheel away from you.
When I was a kid, what sat in my brain about it was oh gosh, I can't think of, Walt Disney. Think Walt Disney, think Pinocchio, and the little cricket, Jiminy Cricket, and and there's this good voice, tempting voice, do the right thing, do the wrong thing, sitting on your shoulder, and that image works for me in terms of where's this temptation coming from, and which voice am I going to listen to, my good conscience or my whatever it is. So it helps to have an image, but I completely agree with what Larry said. It doesn't really matter what it looks like. It's that action of just being tempted into something else that gets in the way of your relationship to God.
I don't know whether part of my feeling is that at times I don't have to have this perfect picture of Jesus, because I am more liable to be irritated and say, come on, folks, Jesus was not a white American. When you look at some of the Sunday school pictures back from the 40s and 50s, you think, my goodness, folks.
Yeah, I think it was Drew Hart who's preached at NOAC for the older adult conference. He said, there are no white people in the Bible. It's like, oh, that's true. How come no one ever said that growing up? There are no, we don't have, we have all these visuals of these pictures in our head, but that's probably not the way it actually happened.
Larry, part of what you're describing, it's cultural representations, right? Of Jesus or whatever. And I think about that in turn, we're mentioning a cultural book, the Screwtape Letters, or we're talking about Flip Wilson. So, I just kind of put that over and against, we've only looked at a couple verses out of the Bible, out of the New Testament, to help us, get an idea. I mean, there's not tons of material in either the Old or New Testament about Satan. There's some, but there sure is a lot of cultural stuff. And of course, there's a lot about Jesus in the Bible. There's a lot of cultural stuff about Jesus. So I'm just kind of reflecting on that, because where does some of our ideas come from? I'm sure a lot of you know Dante's Inferno, in terms of hell and that kind of stuff. And, most of that's not biblical. So how do you separate what's in the Bible and what's cultural, what's appropriate, what isn't?
This is my reference book from Dave's library, The Origin of Satan, and by Elaine Pagels. And it talks about Old Testament origins, New Testament origins, and then all of these cultural references to Satan. So there's a lot of difference between the Old Testament. We see in the Old Testament, Job is the pawn of God and Satan having a little chat one day about how good this follower is, and he would never renounce his love for God. And so, Job was just not even an angel. It was just another being hanging out with God, having a chat one day. So that's a lot different than the New Testament, where, you know, we have Satan is a tempter in the wilderness. I guess maybe that was a temptation and God fell for it, evidently, in the book of Job. Or God allowed this competition to happen to see if Job could be, if he could demolish Job's spirit.
That actually brings up a question that I've had for quite a long time, and I don't remember exactly where in the Bible. I think I've seen it in more than one place, but it says something to the effect of sort of like God was holding court, and sort of Satan just kind of strolls in. And I feel like my upbringing in the Catholic Church and whatever has always been like Satan represents sin and sin can't enter heaven. And so I've always wondered whether that passage is actually very literal. Like, you know, if heaven is this place where God was holding court, how did the devil, who is supposed to be evil, Satan, whatever, how is it that he's able to just stroll into where God is holding court?
There's some great images of judges in court and that kind of imagery in the Old Testament. And so and in the New, where, you know, you have the throne of God and all that. And so it's interesting. Would there be allowed to have something evil in the realm of God, is your question, right? And so there are some, I guess it's scriptural, where it says that that the devil is a fallen angel. I can't remember if this book says that's in the scriptures, or is that tradition? Do you remember, Dave?
Yeah, 1 second, because I was looking up. So the verse that you know, you're talking about Job, it said, so my version says, one day the heavenly beings came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. Now that's, you know, the translation that I'm reading from. And this is a study Bible, so the note says, heavenly beings. I looked at another translation that says angelic beings. So then I did a quick search in my Hebrew, and it says sons of God, or literally the sons of the gods, although Elohim is God. Yeah, so, and what that illustrates is that we have, again, there's lots of ideas that have developed over time. And I was thinking about this. I don't know if you've ever heard of the phrase, the desert fathers and mothers. But like 2nd, 3rd century after Jesus, all these people that went out into the desert. I mean, we have a lot of their writings. And, you know, they have a lot of writings about being tempted. They're going into the desert, into the wilderness, like Jesus did, right? In the Matthew and Luke version. So, yeah, Celia, you're an observant. You're remembering correctly. And if you're interested, that's Job chapter 1, verse 6, that you can take a look at. The angelic stuff, I think there's some references. I don't know that right off the top of my head in the Bible, but you know, obviously that gets developed big time in Christian history.
So how could this evil one be hanging out in the court with God? And that's you know, that's at some point where they might have gotten the tradition that angel falls from heaven because they're not, you know, they're not holy. And so Job is an interesting book where you don't know. It says things that no other book says about God, how, there's this battle going on for the heart of Job, and will he renounce God and trash his faith, but he stays faithful. But and then the answer is, why would God do that? And the answer is, who are you to ask me what God would do? So we don't know how Satan came walking up there with all the other holy people. It doesn't give us much of an answer. But I want to look at John 6, verses 66 to 71, if someone can read that one also.
I'll read it from the Message.
Okay.
After this, many of his disciples left. They no longer wanted to be associated with him. Then Jesus gave the 12 their chance. Do you also want to leave? Peter replied, Master, to whom would we go? You have the words of real life, eternal life. We've already committed ourselves, confident that you are the Holy One of God. Jesus responded, haven't I picked you, the 12? Still, one of you is a devil. He was referring to Judas, son of Simon Iscariot. This man, one from the 12, was even then getting ready to betray him.
So what does the devil look like in this passage?
Simon.
Simon.
Person.
Yeah. And so that makes me stand up and pay attention. It's like, I better look in the mirror. What does Satan look like? Oh, it looks like me. Oh no. So that the Message is very close to the other version that I have too. Did I not choose you, the 12, yet one of you is a devil. And so already planted in that temptation has come and started to dwell in one of the 12, the chosen bunch of followers. So what does that do to how we want to be followers? How is it that we are being tempted then? Could we be like Judas Iscariot? Could we be like him?
Well, I looked up that passage so the Greek word is the word we get diabolical from, diabolos. So, I always find it interesting to kind of note, okay, so, what's being said. So I don't know if one of you is a devil. Judas is a really interesting character. We're opening up so many avenues that have been so developed. I mean, I'm familiar. There are some church traditions where the devil is almost a bigger character than Jesus. Now Flip Wilson sort of does that, in a flip way, right? But boy, there are some. I mean, I'm familiar with them. I didn't grow up in it. But where everything, it's like we got to root the devil out of you, and we're going to pray over you, and you've got demons and all that kind of stuff. I mean, they're not all Pentecostal traditions, but certainly some of them have that. And gosh, I mean, Larry and Donna in Nigeria did you see some of that? I mean, there's, I try to be really careful about just saying, oh, certain cultures have it more than others, but that's often associated like with African religion, right? I mean, that's been
right.
A little bit that I know about that.
In Nigeria, there's a lot of belief in spirits, more so than what I grew up with.
Yeah, Celia, were you going to say something before Dave chimed in? No. I want to say something about spirits. Vicky, were you going to say something?
It's just like, what do you do with these things that are that spirits, temptation, whatever, just seems to kind of tug you and influence you into ways that are dreadful. And when you see people do horrible things, how do you explain evil in the world? And to personify it with Satan is like, makes it concrete and gives it form. And, it's, now you have something you can struggle with, and it's, outside you, but, it's inside you. And so how do you struggle through that? How do you explain it? How do you give it a handle? So
Yeah, I think our culture just puts it under the rug a lot, sweeps all of that evil stuff under the rug. But if you want to study World War II, there's definite evil, and now they're coming out with these movies about one of the islands where they had this horrible torturing going on, and it was just like the place is so full of animosity that walking there you can feel the presence of this evil in this forest where these evil things happened. And I would totally not discount that evil could be almost thick with power, and we can run it, we can try to escape that. But I think there are those things that are just have been taken and taken so far away from the what is good and true and beautiful. So people have done evil things in war times, and there's nobody that ever wishes to wish war on anybody ever again who's been through it. So we have all those experiences of people who had to survive the evilness that was not only around them, but they were part of it. They were doing part of these things that were horrible. So how do we recover from the evil that could creep into our lives? What's the power that can be counteract that in our lives?
Well, kind of following you, but not. Where I was working was the conflict center. We got a building that had been used that was all messed up. It was a big capital campaign to clean it up. And before we entered the building, we had blessing ceremonies. We had a rabbi, we had a Catholic priest, we had a Native American smudge, and we didn't have anybody Muslim along at the time. So but I mean, this sense of spirit, you were talking about the woods and walking in the woods, you can go places and, do you feel goodness? Do you feel evilness? Do you feel positive energy, or do you feel negative energy? And you can walk into a room and you can know that people wish you would just drop off the face of the planet. You can feel that kind of energy. Is that evil? Are those spirits? I don't know what it is, but I think it's real. And I think blessing and cleansing and healing are also just as real. So how do you counter evil spirits with good spirits or whatever? Whether it's in Nigeria or on the Native American plains or wherever. You know, voodoos kinds of things, you know. So.
Yeah, and some of you might be familiar with M. Scott Peck, who wrote a book called The People of the Lie. And he also wrote The Road Less Traveled. That was better known. But The People of the Lie, you know, in his approach, I mean, he was certainly someone who had religious roots, but he was also, you know, a psychiatrist, psychologist, looking at that, you know, The People of the Lie, definitely what you're describing, Vicki, you know. And I mean, I remember you know, I backpacked through Europe, you know, after college and seminary, and you know, I went through Dachau, you know, the one of the concentration camps on a tour. You know, certainly you're seeing embodiments of evil that are intense. Gail's been to monasteries in Scotland where it's the opposite. They call them thin places, you know, and that a lot of folks have said, you know that they have that kind of experience as well on the good side.
So is it the Zambezi Forest? Is that where the Chibok girls were taken after they were abducted in Nigeria?
It's not, that's not the right word.
It's a forest.
It's a forest.
Yeah. And people talk about that having this darkness, and, you know, there's this, you know, it's a place you don't want to go because you know it's not safe and it's dangerous. And I'm sure, you know, that's not the only place where that happens. Like Vicki said, it can be anywhere, and it can be inside of us. That's what the scary thing is. It can grow inside of us.
I'm not sure if this is in C.S. Lewis's book, you know, the Screwtape Letters. I wouldn't be surprised though if he doesn't, you know, have something about it would be good for our side to either have the Christian be too interested or not interested enough in spiritual matters or in evil. You know, either one of those would be would keep his or her focus off of who God and who Jesus is. I'm pretty sure that's probably in there.
Yeah. Celia, you had something you wanted to add?
Not really. I think, like, listening to this discussion, what I'm wondering is where does that come from? You know, like when you talk about the places you go into and you can feel the evil, is that like a force? Is it, you know, like, where is it emanating from? Where is it coming from? Why is it concentrated in certain areas? Because I feel like growing up, it was more that, you know, it's kind of yin and yang. You can't have good without evil. And so God was the embodiment of good and Satan was the embodiment of evil. And you sort of were taught to try to be like God and avoid Satan. So I think that's where a lot of the things, like with the Flip Wilson sketch, that if you did something that was bad or that you were not supposed to do, that immediately fell under evil and that the devil drove you to do it, that kind of thing. But I don't think I've ever thought about it in terms of the way we are talking about it, as in like you feel the evil in like this forest, or like, you know, so I'm thinking to myself, then where does it come from? What is that force that, you know, brings that sense of evil?
And who created that force, right?
Well, why don't we want to go through cemeteries at night? You know, I mean, there's just a lot of unknown for sure. And, you know, Edgar Allan Poe sure made a good living off of those kinds of stories, didn't he?
Yeah, I think that there's this one Native American fable that says, you know, there's evil, there's, you know, the two wolves, there's an evil wolf and a good wolf, and which one will survive? And the answer is the one that I feed. And so, you know, what am I giving my attention to, my time to? And like in the Screw Tape Letters, you know, if I think about evil all the time, I'm probably not focusing on Jesus. If I never think on evil, I probably don't understand how it's working at me and picking away at me. And so, you know, which one do I feed? I have to not give it ample food all the time. But, you know, I don't know that we can say that we are born without evil. I mean, who could claim to be born with perfect sinlessness? Raise your hands if you are born.
Well, I have a question related but not. Verd Eller, didn't he do something with the Screw Tape Letters? Didn't he write a book about, what am I, okay, I don't want to distract us from
the mad world. No.
Well, there was that, but I thought he had a different one. Okay, never mind. If it's not doing anything, you know, it's like.
Oh, here's Fred. Hi, Fred.
Yeah, hi, Fred. Welcome. So here, you know, here we are. Here I am, and here's my life and my spirit. And I think it is your wolf story. What am I going to feed? You know, and on Monday I'm doing good, but on Tuesday not so good. You know, and if I'm really holy, I got it. I got the goodness all the time. But that doesn't, I haven't practically figured that part out. So it is this yin and yang kind of thing, but I think it's, what do I feed? You know, how do I get blessed, find grace?
And do I let Fred Flip Wilson take away my responsibility for which one I feed? Oh, the devil made me feed that one. I had to buy that dress. I mean, that's so easy to fall into. And it's so not helpful to fall into that.
I think it's what you let in. You let in good thoughts or bad thoughts.
Right. Say more. That's absolutely.
Because every day, right, we have a choice, like how you behave, how you interpret things, where your thoughts go. So I think it's just what you let in. I think interesting concept as how we are born. Are we born with what, right? But I do think we're made to make choices, right? We have the ability to choose, and
right.
Choose, right? You choose to have if you want to watch a very destructive movie that's, you know, a horror movie from my end, which I'm like, I think those are just bad. So it's like, I don't let that in because I just think it's bad. But I think it's you just go through every day. You choose to let something in or not. And it's the good evil all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I was listening to Michelle Obama's podcast, and it's like, the famous line is, when they go low, we go high. That's a choice. I mean, nobody really wants to go high when they go low, but they're making a conscious effort, and because they don't want to be a part of that. We have our musician at church has a song, Spread Joy. You don't have to be a part of that evil stuff. You don't have to be a part of that negative stuff. just spread joy, like you can make a choice like Kathy's saying.
And so I grew up with a lot of broader cultural messaging around original sin. So you're born and you got original sin. And then it was just so freeing for me to read Matthew Fox's book, Original Blessing. And it's like, why, yes, this makes so much more sense to me and fit into my world of thinking about myself and life and all. So you even have a choice in your starting point. So I resonate with Original Blessing and then trying to live that out.
God created the world and it said it was good. And so Matthew Fox says, you were created as part of this world that is very good. And so you're not having to backpedal all the time to get rid of all the original sin in your life. You can just be making that blessing, keep going, pay it forward, pay it forward, pay it forward.
Well, Vicki, that would bring up a whole different area of discussion, which is a good one. I'm thinking about, Kathy, what you said though, in terms of, what do you allow in, or, what do you focus on? I don't necessarily think counting noses, like counting verses, is the best way to decide what's most important in the Bible. But, I'm looking at, we're looking at this passage about Satan or the devil, or, and we've mentioned Job and a couple others. It is in there, but boy, there's not a lot. And so to me, that says, okay, there's a lot of things I'm not going to be able to know for sure just based on what the Bible says. I do know that there's a lot I know about what Jesus teaches, for example, because there's so much more of that stuff, right? So I kind of see that as, so I maybe need to do a little bit of time on that, but my focus, kind of like letting the good stuff in, is, I shouldn't be overly concerned about the Satan stuff or the devil stuff. You may have other thoughts.
Did you want to say something?
Well, I have a question.
But that was for anybody, yeah.
Oh, I have a question. This is a very, very interesting discussion for me, because it's definitely very different from anything I've ever heard in terms of, the devil and Satan and how our lives are influenced by it. And because, like, my whole take on Christianity and the reason we want to be Christians is because we are turning away from a life of sin, which is what the devil stands for, or what he induces. If we go back to, like, Genesis, for example, when the serpent tempts Eve, that's supposedly how sin enters the world, through one man. And as Vicki was talking about, in the Catholic Church, there's this tradition of, through that sin, we are all born with original sin, which we inherited, and so we are born sinners, and we have to. That is why it was so important for, in the Old Testament, for the burnt offering sacrifices, to make your peace with God. That was how you got salvation in the Old Testament. And in the New Testament, we no longer do that, because Jesus has become the Lamb whose blood was sacrificed for us. And through that, we get salvation. So I've always kind of thought of the devil kind of like the way it's described in Job, as this sort of like entity, tug of war, that's, like fighting against the good all the time, and that our job here on earth is to fight it. And that is why we become born again and align with Christ, so that we get, we turn from sin and we get a chance at eternal life. And I mean, that's kind of the way I've always thought about it. But hearing this today, it makes me think that it's kind of more within yourself. Like, what kind of person are you? And so I'm curious as how that, what does that mean in terms of our salvation? If it's not this greater force, or if it's not, like, what does that mean in terms of why we seek salvation?
Yeah, that's you have described the Augustinian version of Christianity, and then Vicky is talking about the Celtic or Pelagian version of Christianity, and they had this big fight in, I don't know, 300 AD, and they were duking it out as to which version was going to win. And to me, the answer is it's both. There is this evil that is outside of us, and there's this evil that is within us. And to me, it's the one that we feed. And so if we're going to feed the temptations, then we're going to be walking away from God. And so the whole point of salvation is turning towards God. So that's what it means to me. Salvation is turning our eyes. It's like, I don't have to be part of that. I have to be part of this. Why do I keep looking back there? And why do I keep being drawn to that one when this is the one that is calling me, and I get tempted to ignore it? So that's why I need salvation. I need to turn and maybe 100, 1,000 times a day, I need to turn and to have that salvation. So I don't think once and for all does it. I think we have to do, make it that decision, but maybe we have to renew. Does that answer your question at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think it gives me some insight into it. I think, growing up, especially in the Catholic Church, things are very black and white, and so, and, I think like when I became a teenager and through most of my adult life, I've sort of flirted, if you want, with Baptist religions for the most part. I've gone to churches and listened to sermons and that kind of thing. And definitely, I think Dave mentioned earlier that in some Pentecostal type religions, the idea of, evil and Satan and, is very, very prevalent. And so there's always like this call to renounce Satan and to turn away from your sins, and by the fact that you pledge your life to God and you decide you want to be a born again Christian. It's kind of interesting what you said, Gail, that you said it's not a one-time thing, but it's definitely the way I feel like it's preached in a lot of these Baptist churches that I have attended, that unless you accept Christ as your personal savior and sort of start on that journey, you were living in sin and you were a property of the devil, no matter how good a person you were or you are or what good things you do. So it's kind of, like I said, it's very interesting to hear like a different take on what Satan and the devil is.
You've described the denominations very well. So why are there so many denominations? I don't think we've got it figured out is probably the answer.
Well, I know we're almost at time, but a quick observation. What I think, obviously for 2,000 years, Christians and people reading the text have said, gosh, we have all these different ways of trying to understand these texts. And even tonight, we've just even scratched the surface a little bit. Because, I noticed, Celia, you mentioned that it says the serpent, Genesis, it's in Genesis 3, and it never says Satan or the devil or anything. It just says, all of a sudden this being, the serpent, who is more crafty, shows up. And what what the text says is that it's the knowledge of good and evil that, eating this piece of fruit brings to the to them. So we've developed, and I'm not here to say what's right or wrong about that, but sure, there's a whole history of interpretation around that stuff. And I'm a text guy because I like to see what the text says and then try to say, okay, so why then does, certain groups say, oh man, that's Satan and look out. Why are others saying, well, no, maybe it isn't original sin, kind of what Vicky's saying. And so we're just scratching the surface.
So Fred, do you have any clue what we're talking about?
Well, I think it's a fascinating discussion, and I really regret that I had a conflict and was just able to get in on the tail end of it. But it's yeah, there's a lot to it. And when you talk about the issue of salvation, if I remembered my Koine Greek class, the word salvation in Greek was in the progressive tense. Am I right about that, David?
Active sounds right. I don't know right offhand, but that's yeah. In other words, it's not past tense, but it's present and into the future. I think that's
right. Past, present, and future. It's a moving thing, which would play into some of what you were talking about. I struggle with the concept of Satan. I'll be honest with you, but I'll just kind of leave it at that.
But yeah, you're not alone. So we're struggling together. I'm going to stop the recording here, maybe. Oops, not. I'm going to have to stop share. So in the chat box, I'm going to put it up again. There's the link to the Brethren Bible study, which is the compelling vision. So that will be 13 of those. So we'll probably try to work our way through starting next week. And it's using the compelling vision that the denomination is trying to adopt about Jesus in the neighborhood. So there'll be some Bible studies that will just take from there. I wrote one of them on day 6 or something. So you have to wait a whole long time before you see how much my Bible study got changed from what I sent in to what came out. So no spoiler alerts, you're gonna have to wait. So let me pause recording.